Hey guys, I'm EJ and this is Kendall here, and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 coaches in college football this year that will be on the hot seat. Now, Kendall, we all understand that the coaching carousel in college football can be very chaotic. It's a very fluid situation. So today we want to talk about some of the coaches that we think should be looking over their shoulder in terms of their job security.
Yeah, I mean, this is off the heels of a certain coach out at Ole Miss getting let off the hook.
Quite nefarious situation over there in Ole Miss with Hugh Freeze.
And so we have other coaches that are in different situations, but also could be on the chopping block very soon. At number 1, we have Brian Kelly, the head coach at Notre Dame. Of all the coaches on our list, I feel like Brian Kelly is the one that his success doesn't feel that far, doesn't feel like it was that long ago. Because, I mean, just 2 years ago, he won 10 games and was playing in the Fiesta Bowl. But that shows you how bad of a season they had last year. Mm-hmm. That shows you winning 4 games when you had Deshaun Kaiser, who throughout the season was projected to be the number 1 pick, ended up as a second-round quarterback. How do you lose 4 games with that guy? And at Notre Dame,
win 4 games, you mean?
Or win 4 games with that guy. At Notre Dame, you feel like the success and the expectations are so high. You got to do better than that.
Yeah, I feel like Brian Kelly's kind of a weird scenario because he's had a couple of seasons, like the 10-win season and the year, of course, when he went to the national championship game and then got smashed by Alabama. They've had some wildly successful years, but I feel like the problem with him is that there's a perception problem where when things get bad, it looks chaotic. Right. He's changing a zillion quarterbacks. He's beat red on the sidelines, going crazy, and that's just a bad look. It doesn't look like he ever really has control of the program when things get rough. And at Notre Dame, it's not, people look at Notre Dame and say, oh, it should be an easy place to win, but it hasn't been. So when he has those situations where things get out of control, it doesn't look good for him, and he comes into a tough year this year.
And the Notre Dame administration, much like all the schools on our list, of the coaches on our list, they have to look at themselves and say, our job is a lot more attractive post Brian Kelly than it was post Charlie Weis.
Yes.
Because Brian Kelly proved that you can win at a high level in Notre Dame, whereas Charlie Weis didn't do that at all. So they had to settle for Brian Kelly. But now, post Brian Kelly, there may be some big name coaches knocking on the door for that Notre Dame job.
And we've seen in the Kelly era that they've been able to recruit really well. Even in this season where he comes in battle, they still have a top 10 recruiting class for next year according to Rivals. So it's a place you can recruit, and it's a place that we've seen you can win. But I think the chaotic nature of Kelly's tenure makes it tough to see him sticking around unless they have another big year this year.
Yeah, at number 2, we have Gus Malzahn, the head coach at Auburn. Now, he's a guy that it feels like it's been a while since Cam Newton was quarterbacking the Auburn Tigers and he was offensive coordinator under Gene Chizik. And it even feels like a while when he was the head coach in a national championship game. He's in a situation where it's not like he's done a terrible job, but when you go 8 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins, you kind of look at this and say, you look at Nick Saban and you're like, you see the success that he's had at Alabama, and you're like, we should be like that if you're Auburn's administration. And they've kind of stood pat at that 8-win level. And he's in a situation where you look at Hugh Freeze, another former Arkansas State coach who just got let off the hook. He may be in a similar situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think Gus Malzahn is an interesting scenario because I feel like, it was a dumpster fire with Gene Chizik. I mean, they really need to come in and change everything that happened. So they were at their rock bottom. He came and immediately got them to national championship.
Which was that bought him like a good 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it was remarkable. And since then, they've kind of plateaued. He's a tough case because I feel like he's one of the guys where I look at and I say, the grass might not be greener on the other side in terms of who you get. Because say what you want about Auburn, it's a great traditional program. But if you look at the top SEC programs, to me, it's still a little lower than you look at when you consider, your Floridas, your Alabamas, your LSUs, your Georgias. I feel like coaches aren't going to be clamoring to run to Auburn, especially with Nick Saban, knowing that that's the guy you're going to be competing against year in and year out. So in terms of who you can get after he leaves, that would scare me in terms of firing him. He's been steady at 8 to 7 wins. The problem is at Auburn, they have expectations on wanting to compete with Alabama, and that means compete for a national championship every year.
The question I have with Malzahn is that he did win the national championship at his 1 year. Yeah. But that was with Gene Chizik's players. And what has he done since then? We've seen He's gone to he went to the Sugar Bowl inexplicably last year after winning 8 games. But like I said, 8 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins. Does that buy you enough? Does another 8-win season buy him another year? I think it does, but then I think he's really on the hot seat. But 6 wins, if they really underachieve this year, and he may end up being on the chopping block.
Oh, yeah.
But at number 3, we have Kevin Sumlin, the Texas A&M coach. He's a guy that I like Kevin Sumlin. I think he's a good coach, but I think both sides probably need a change of scenery because Kevin Sumlin's a guy that, you know, he was huge under Johnny Manziel. I mean, he had the rock star quarterback. He was the rock star head coach down south, and every player wanted to play for Kevin Sumlin.
Showing up in helicopters.
Yeah,
he was a celebrity coach in the South.
And that star has started to fade a little bit. You know, now that Tom Herman's at Texas, I think Texas A&M looking at themselves like we stuck with Kevin Sumlin a year when maybe if we would have gotten out early, maybe we had a chance to get Tom Herman. But now we're stuck with no Tom Herman. I don't think Gary Patterson's leaving TCU for the A&M job, so A&M's now kind of stuck in no man's land. And their AD even came out and said, "We can't." Kevin Sumlin knows he can't have another 8-win season because they've won 8 games, I believe, 3 straight years.
Yeah.
So he's in a tough situation where 8 games is not going to buy him another year at Texas A&M.
Yeah, and I think Sumlin's in a similar to Malzahn in the sense where I also feel like the grass may not be greener on the other side in terms of who you hire. Because say what you want about these 8-win seasons, and as disappointing as they've been when you consider some of the players someone's had come through the program, whether they played for them, him has been a problem because they've transferred immediately or played a couple of games and decided I'm out or leave after 1 year. But the one thing I would say is that Texas A&M for the last 20 years has just been a mediocre program. They've been up and down. They've had several coaching changes. This is the first time in a while they've been kind of a steady program. So it would be interesting for them to move on from someone. But I think you make the good point that, you know, I think that it's become kind of stale. I think that the excitement around the program isn't there right now. And they just paid hundreds of millions of dollars for the renovations to that new stadium. They want to make sure that they're competing for a national championship. They don't want 8-win seasons. So that's why he's going to be on the hot seat this year.
The debacle with the quarterback situation, when they had Kyler Murray, who's at Oklahoma now, they had Jake Allen, who's at Houston now, or Kyle Allen, rather.
Yeah.
And both guys decided to leave. Both guys, number 1 quarterbacks in the country in their respective classes. Yeah. Both guys leave post Johnny Manziel. They miss out on Tate Martell, who was the number one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in this year's recruiting class, who ended up going to Ohio State. So now they're kind of left with, they still ended up with Kellen Mond, but this was the program that was supposed to have somebody that was supposed to be post Johnny Manziel, a Heisman Trophy winning caliber quarterback.
And I know someone bought him Manziel bought someone a lot of recruiting capital with those incredible seasons he had at A&M. But when Johnny's fall from grace, so to speak, happened in the NFL, he never became that star player that I think people at Texas A&M hope he would have been on the NFL level. I think that hurt Sumlin. I think kids looked at that and said, okay, you had one player that was great, but he flopped in the NFL.
You couldn't rein him in.
And you couldn't rein him in college, and that actually hurt him in terms of how he ended up, behaving on the NFL level. And I think as we look at his recruiting class, it's not terrible. This year it comes in at number 20, but he was recruiting in the top 5.
Yeah, in the SEC, you're pretty much guaranteed a top 25.
Yeah, like you're in the SEC. He's in the state of Texas.
State's he's going to get top 25.
He's going to get players, but he's not recruiting it the way he was early on. And I think some of that has to do with Johnny's fault. I don't want to blame everything on Johnny. I'm not even trying to make this a bash Johnny segment, but I think Johnny's fall has definitely hurt Sumlin's case when it comes to recruiting kids.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at number 4 we have Jim Mora. At UCLA, Jim Mora, he's in a rough situation because he only won 4 games last year, which that's a number that you kind of have to blink and be like, really? They lost 4 games?
They won 4 games, yeah.
Well, yeah, they only won 4 games. I mean, this is a team that wasn't. I mean, they were bad. They only won 4 games, but they had high expectations going into the year.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of got it passed because Josh Rosen dealt with shoulder injuries, and they were a young team. But now you're going to Josh Rosen's junior year. We're talking about a guy that was kind of heralded as the next Peyton Manning, the next Andrew Luck, and they haven't won big under the guy. And you kind of hope that if you're Jim Mora, you can find a way to sneak 9-10 wins out of Josh Rosen this season because he's probably a year away from going to the NFL.
Yeah.
And if you're UCLA, if they have another 8-win season, they have a 7-win season, Josh Rosen goes to the NFL, you're now looking at yourself saying, well, we got nothing out of the Josh Rosen era. And now we're left with, a coach that has no quarterback and hasn't really proven anything with a quarterback. Should we move on?
Yeah, Mora's also in trouble because he possibly could have squandered an excellent opportunity to take advantage of USC's little lull they've been in. USC was down for the last 3 or 4 years, and that's partially why UCLA did well in those last 3 or 4 years in terms of winning 9 wins, 10 wins in one season. But he never quite really took LA by the throat the way I think that UCLA fans hoped that he would, the way I think he kind of even talked about how he would, and the fact that they never really made that jump into being a truly elite program. Now Sam Darnold's a bad boy over there in downtown LA, and now they're a team where there's certainly in question in terms of whether or not they can come out of that South Division. And USC certainly looks like they're back to being a national contender after winning the Rose Bowl last year. UCLA goes back to being a little brother. They're not what they wanted at all.
Yeah.
And even though I think that he's fine for this year, regardless of what happens, but I think
if they repeat 4 wins, there.
I mean, I don't think he'll do that. That's what I'm saying. I think he'll be fine. But in terms of moving forward, I think that USC may be on the cusp of, like, I don't want to say a Pete Carroll type dynasty again, but they'll be close to being dominant once again.
And ironically, Jim Mora and Kevin Sumlin meet up in week 1.
I know.
Texas A&M, UCLA. So that could decide the fate of either coach depending on how the game goes. At number 5, we have Lincoln Riley, the newly minted head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, Lincoln Riley is a lot different than the other guys we have on our list because he's the only coach that's record is 0-0. He has no wins, no losses. It's strange because that type of guy generally isn't on the hot seat.
Right.
But he's in a strange situation because he got the job really late in the offseason. Bob Stoops dropped a bombshell and said, I'm leaving. I'm done coaching. I'm not sure if I buy that long term, but he claims he's done coaching right now. And so Lincoln Riley, they gave him the job. Generally, that late in the offseason, like we saw at Ole Miss, you'll just give a guy the intern position. But they felt it wasn't too late in the offseason, and they really liked Lincoln Riley. Mm-hmm. So they said, we'll give him the job. But he's really young. Oklahoma has a lot of expectations this year. Baker Mayfield's back. And this is a team that has playoff expectations, national championship expectations. Not to say that, he can't live up to those. He's in a situation where he could very well win 10, 11, 12 games,
right?
If not more. But if they don't, if they win 7, if they win 8, if they really drop the ball, is there an outside chance that they move on from Lincoln Riley and say, let's go after John Gruden, let's go after Les Miles, let's go after Chip Kelly?
Yeah, I think that it would take a disastrous season for that to happen. They'd have to win like 7 games for a team that's looking at trying to get to the playoffs. So if something like that happens, I could certainly see Riley. Riley's an interesting situation because the nature in which how he got the job allows him to be very much, I think, on the hot seat. I would agree. But I think also the nature in which Sooner fans were so displeased with Bob Stoops also gives him the opportunity where if he finds himself in the playoffs next year, he earns himself like 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Because the Oklahoma fan base was so frustrated with Bob Stoops' inability to win another national championship, and they felt like his moniker of Big Game Bob was just a moniker. It wasn't real because in all big games, just like we saw last year with Ohio State early in the season, he hasn't come up big, or even against Houston. So I think that if Riley wins those games, he becomes the new toast of town in Norman. But if he finds himself struggling and they get to 8 wins, and when Sooner fans start thinking about all those years of Bob Stoops, even when they were disappointed, they were still going to the Fiesta Bowl and they were still winning 10 games. That's Riley's problem. If he comes in and has a rough season year 1, when this has been an established program that's been a national championship contender every year, that's where he could see himself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and Lincoln Riley is a guy, as a coordinator, he's very young as a coordinator. He just came from East Carolina.
Right.
He just got the job not too long ago. I don't look at him as like a big name coordinator. Like when Will Muschamp was named the coaching lady at Texas, he had a resume. He had been to a national title game as a defensive coordinator. we've seen coordinators in the past. Kirby Smart has had he went through a bunch of
got a bunch of rings.
They have rings as a defensive coordinator. Those guys have earned those types of jobs. Lincoln Riley kind of he stepped in, a good situation at Oklahoma, and now he's all of a sudden the head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners. It seems inexplicable, but it's up to him to now prove why he got the job at such a young age.
He's in a winnable Big 12. He has all the tools to put himself in great shape, which is also, it's like a blessing and a curse, because if something bad happens somehow, people are going to be like, you had all the tools for this to go well, why didn't it go well? And that's where he can see himself out the door.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, other names on the list, we thought about Butch Jones at Tennessee.
Yeah.
I feel like he's a guy who's been on the hot seat pretty much since he got the job.
He's in a weird situation because I feel like everyone's saying, oh, don't worry, next year Tennessee's going to be good.
Yeah.
And they never are, but because he keeps recruiting well, it buys him another year. Or oftentimes it's been the offense has been way behind the defense. Oh, once he's an offense, it'll be fine. So he every year you could say he maybe could be on the hot seat, but they seem to be still not really ready to pull that trigger.
I feel like Tennessee is a little worried about the coaches that are out there. Well, at least in the past. Now, this year may be different. If they feel like we can get Les Miles, that changes things.
Yeah.
But in the past, they felt, who's really going to take the job? Because John Gruden's been pretty much steadfast and say, I'm not taking a Tennessee job or I'm not taking any job. So that's always been the guy that said, if we can get John Gruden, we'll move on from Butch Jones.
Yeah.
But and Rich Rodriguez is another guy I thought about. Arizona's a basketball school, similar to UCLA. So I think both schools should really look at this and say, is the pasture greener past our Jim Moras and our Rich Rodriguez's? Because we're basketball schools at heart, and moving on from these solid coaches in the football department could end up being a bad decision if you're those two schools.
Yeah, when you're a basketball school and you just try to decide, we want to be a football school, and you take away the kind of steady success you've had with your football team, even if it's not winning national championships or winning conference championships, but it's going to bowl games, making a lot of money. That's where it gets dangerous. Rich Rod's a very good football coach. I think he's done fine at Arizona, considering it's Arizona.
The Pac-12 has just been tough the last
year. The Pac-12 has gotten a lot better, and I think that I think moving him would be not a good move, because who are you going to get at Arizona?
That's my thing.
With Rich Rod.
Unless they're really trying to line their pockets. If the boosters have deep pockets and they're saying, all right, we'll go out and get somebody, then I understand it. But I don't think that's going to happen.
That doesn't really happen in college football. The idea that I'm just going to give the guy a lot of money and he's going to leave this great place to go to a school that's not really into football, it just doesn't happen that often.
But yeah, that's our list. If there are any other names that we missed, put that down in the comments section. But for EJ, I'm Kendall. Peace.
Thanks for watching.